Welcome everybody. We're here at the Community Preservation Committee meeting. It's like, why don't we do a roll call just so we can see who's here from the committee. I'm Paul Carey.
Joan Scribner.
Rick Porter.
Russell Wood.
And on the screen, we've got Chris Scott,
Yes, I see that.
Brittany,
Here.
and Mike.
Here.
All right, so we've got a full house here tonight, and you folks haven't met her in other groups. We've got Grace Brownell here for the first time with this committee. Grace, you've been here, what, a month? About a month. So welcome aboard, and Grace is going to be taking the minutes. So if she tells you to slow down or repeat something, please obey her. We've got on the agenda tonight, there are 4 public hearings. Mike, am I correct that the first public hearing is going to come off though, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the Lake and Ponds project, which is scheduled for 7:05, is not going to happen. If anyone's here just for that, you don't need to stick around. We're going to have a public hearing at 7:15 for the open space project on the Robertson Conservation Land Bridge. At 7:30, we'll have a public hearing on the historical project for the Heritage Park sign. And at 7:35, we'll have a public hearing for the historical project for the Grange renovations. We might have a little bit of downtime between now and then, depending on how those hearings go. So just to start off, the prior minutes from March 1 were circulated. Joan got them recirculated today. Did anyone have any comments on the minutes? Good. All right. Hearing none, I will move that we approve the minutes as written.
I'll second that.
Moved and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Chris.
Aye.
Brittany.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Russ.
Aye.
Joan. And Rick.
Aye.
I'll say aye for unanimous. We have been asked to pay an invoice for CMRPC. That's $3,500, and it is for the Upton 2022 housing production plan. That's been it's the 25% completion, and we do have the funds for that. It goes back a while, and the town planner, the town manager, and I were going, and the town accountant were going back and forth over the last few days to figure out exactly where the money was. Back in 2011, I believe it was, the town voted money into an affordable housing plan, and there is $11,018.61 left in that bucket. We as a board voted back in April of last year, April 26, 2022, we had on before us the request for the use of the housing funds to do this year's housing production plan. The town clerk presented that. The quote CMRPC was $15,000. We noted that we had the $11,000 still remaining, and we approved the use of those funds. So we've already approved it, and we have the funds. There are no objections. I would sign the voucher for the first $3,500 for the 25%. Anyone have any questions or objections to me signing as chair?
So just making sure. So it's open for 15. There's 11 left. So there's a first 25% already been used? What's the,
So the good question. That's why it took us 3 days to get
Yep.
through this. It was actually voted in 2011. It was more money. And then in last year, the town clerk said, hey, we've already voted for this $50,000 housing production plan. Will CPC kick in money from the 2011 funds that are still available?
got it.
So what has been requested, the total plan project was $15,000. This 3,500 is the 25% progress payment, and we're using our 11. So we don't have enough money to pay it out of that bucket in total, but we voted a year ago to put what money we did have, the 11,000 towards the 15.
Okay,
So
okay.
money's been hanging around for a while, and luckily somebody smart realized that. And rather than just give it back, we're using it up for
Sure.
11, 12 years later. Any other questions? Hey, I'm going to sign this. Give it to Grace. Give to the town accountant. Thank you. All right, that was the only financial thing I had. Mike, I know we're not going to go forward with the Lakes and Ponds public hearing, but do you want to give us an update on where that project starts? I know we approved and the town approved phase 1, and maybe you want to just give us an update on what is happening on phase 2.
Well, phase 1, the contract's either been awarded or will be very soon, and we're going to have a meeting with the contractor, which is TRC, probably next week, a week from tonight, to kick it off. So that's all set. The winning bid was around $40K, pretty much the funds that were available. For phase 2, the selectmen declined to put that on the warrant for annual town meeting. I think there was some support for putting it on the November special town meeting. And the reason that, well, I can't speak for them, but one of the concerns that was raised during a meeting with the selectmen and the FinCom was that we didn't have any cost estimate or from any contractors for that one. We asked the CPC for $50,000. As it turns out, last week I did get a cost estimate from one of the contractors that potentially could bid on it, and that was $50,000 to $70,000, depending on basically there's some questions they had about the scope, basically, and so they gave us a range, 50 to 70. And we'll try to get another estimate at some point, and hopefully be able to put this on the warrant in November.
Okay. And you'd be coming back through CPC for the next round of funding?
I suppose so, yes. The committee the Lakes and Ponds hasn't made that decision, but I would guess that, would happen.
All right, great. Thanks, Mike. Before we start the first public hearing, the Open Space Committee, what we'll do is on each of these public hearings, we'll ask the applicant to give an overview of their request and the justification for it. We'll throw it open first to members of the CPC to ask questions, and then we'll open it up to members of the public to ask questions. And generally what we've done is we'll get through these public hearings, and we've generally voted whether or not to support the request at town meeting. If the CPC votes to send a project to town meeting, then it goes to town meeting. It needs to be approved at town meeting. If the CPC denies the request or votes not to send it on the favorable recommendation, that's it. It does die here, at least for CPC funds. So that's how things work. We do have a couple of minutes. I don't know if anyone had any other general business that we need to address before we get to the first public hearing.
Did we have newspaper ads to pay for or not yet?
Haven't gotten a request for payment yet. So I think that those ran last month, or we did one ad for all of the public hearings. And I assume that the town will get the bill this month and we'll probably pay it next month, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Just give it a minute. Mike, did you have something that you wanted to, I think you're going to present? Was there something you wanted us to have up on the screen that we could get ready?
I'm not sure if Marcella or myself is going to present. Marcella's Stas is the chair of the Land Stewardship Committee. But I think either way, whoever presents it, we do have a part of a PowerPoint that, if we could share, that would be great. Or PDF, actually, I guess it is. It's Marcella.
Hi. Yeah, I'm happy to present, and then you can fill in the gaps for me, Mike.
All right. Well, it's 7:15, so let's we're going to suspend our regular meeting. We will come back to it, and we're going to open a public hearing on a request by the Upton Open Space Committee for funding in the amount of up to $120,000 to construct a footbridge over the Warren Brook within the Robertson Family Conservation Restriction. So, Marcella, why don't you take it away?
Okay. I don't know if the PowerPoint, some of the pictures are going to be presented. They would help explain one of our primary reasons for wanting to put this bridge in this place. It's a photograph that shows you the way the water rushes through there when we have a heavy rain event. And
Marcella, who's got that to share? We can allow, I think, a screen share.
Is that what Mike sent today? The image he sent?
Mike sent a picture of a bridge at a different site. There's a similar design.
Yeah, excuse me. That's not it. Grace, do you have the application that we put in the CPC application? It was a PDF, and after you get through 2 or 3 pages of text, there's a series of figures and a photograph that would probably help to explain what we're proposing a lot. If you can't find it, I can try to find it.
while
Ponds,
this is being
Warren Brook Trail Bridge, the second one down.
This one here?
Yeah, let's try that. See what it comes up as. So we've got the images of the bridge itself. So we're going to share Grace is going to share her screen in just a sec, and I've got the application with me. I can tell you where.
Paul, if I may just interject, the application includes some figures beyond just the conceptual bridge plan, and
Yeah.
I think those would be important to show. Yeah. So this is the application includes some additional information.
So we can go back. Do you want to start with the figure? You want to start with the figures or start with these depictions?
These depictions aren't the entire
Right. I think we've got 2 tranches. So did we hit 1 already or 2? Let's try whichever. So there's a 1 and a 2. Yeah. Try that. So this mic is what she's gonna start up with. Why don't you share that? Mike might be able to walk you through it. This is the June 15, 2022 cost estimates. Is that what you're looking for, Mike?
No, I'm sorry again. If you go to it's posted on the CPC webpage, the actual entire application, and there's a few pages of text, and then there are figures beyond.
I've got a hard copy here.
Yeah, it's the hard copy that you have. There's an electronic copy on the town's website. I think it's there, Grace. If you just click on another, there you go. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What page would you like, Mike?
Muted Mike. Mike's off.
Sorry, just scroll down to the figures. Like, yeah, there you go. A little further.
So is it other,
There,
the
there you
other
go.
funding source? You got it?
So I can start with what these figures represent. What we have had feedback from the public about is developing a townwide trail network. This, having acquired the Mechanic Street property, gives us a huge opportunity to tie into trails at Stephens and hopefully at some point bring them over to the Warren Brook Conservation Area. In the other direction is the Robertson property, where we'd like to put this bridge, and that bridge is an important connector between the Robertson property and the trails that I just, the properties that I just mentioned. And then if you go in the other direction, you connect up to Upton State Forest, as well as a town-owned parcel, Pleasant Woods. So without this bridge, it's, unless the water is really low, you can't get safely across Warren Brook. And we discussed the possibility of putting a bridge in that wasn't quite as large and elaborate, but we realized that with rain events as they are, and you'll see in the photograph in this presentation, the water rushes through there at an amazing speed, and it could not only wash away a bridge, a small one or something, you know, even if we just put something simple there, but it could wash away dogs, children, adults. You know, that water moves with a great deal of force. So that the safety and the connector are the two primary reasons for our desire to get this bridge in. Did you want to add anything, Mike? If you scroll
I guess
down,
go through the slides. The next slide will illustrate some of what Marcella has said. There's the location relative to the Mechanic Street property, which is the blue hatched Upton State Forest, Stephens Farm. This next one, please. One of the aspects of this bridge would be a part of a basically a North Upton Loop Trail that is nearly complete. It's on various town properties. A lot of it's on Upton State Forest. You can see it, the conceptual trail here. There's really, once a trail bridge is constructed, there's really only one gap in this conceptual trail loop that would need to be addressed. The loop could connect to West Upton through the Pleasant Woods Conservation Area, and it could also go into Hopkinton and into Grafton.
Like on this, where's our bridge here? Is that in the little blue circle?
It's the blue circle.
Yep. And the needed to complete the loop is that hash mark, kind of black and white on the left edge.
Correct.
Okay. You want to talk about the trail? Keep going and talk about the design.
Yes, why don't we take a look at what the proposed bridge looks like, and inserted into a photo of the site. That would give people a great visual. So I don't know how much further you need to scroll down to find that image. I think it might be that would be the bridge, but there's a very dynamic image of it with the inserted into the photo of the Gorham Brook. Are there any more images?
Yep, coming up.
Okay.
One more. There you go.
There, that's the one that I was talking about. So we did considerable calculation, figuring out velocity and how much height that we could expect from a given rain event. We wanted to have this be up high enough so that it would not have any issues with water flowing over it. It's it connects the trails very nicely in this location. We did have a different location in mind initially. However, that would have been a far more extensive project. It would have cost much more than we could even consider, and it was a larger bridge. So this is our scaled down version.
You want us to continue to see the more photos?
I don't know what's up next, Mike. Was there anything else that's important to share?
I think the cost estimate is there, and maybe up and downstream picture photos of Warren Brook at the location. So yeah, please squirrel.
Yeah, there's your cost estimate there. Coming up.
Bridge. So we hired a company which specializes in building trails and trail bridges. They're located in New York. And we being the Conservation Commission and Land Stewardship, and they prepared that design that you just saw, conceptual design, and then they also gave us a cost estimate to design, build the bridge, and the cost estimate was $88,000. We're asking for 120, just to make sure we have a very robust contingency. The contingency is about 30%, roughly, which is a lot. But with inflation and we thought it was reasonable to ask for more rather than less. And we have applied for a trails grant from the state for $100,000. The grant request was $100,000, and if that was received, the state would pay 80% of that cost. It would be reimbursable.
80% of the 120 or 80% of the 100?
80% of the 100. And it's a reimbursable grant, so the town would, much like these land protection projects that we've had in the last 10 years or so, the town would need to basically have say it was $100,000 on hand, to pay for the design and construction of the bridge. Then once that was done, once the contractor was paid, the town would get reimbursed for whatever expenses the town had.
Okay.
I'd also like to point out that this bridge, we did look at other options. Like I said, we were looking at the possibility of something smaller or something that perhaps it could be a scout project. But we really felt like the issue here is the safety, and having this company Tahawas do the project. It kind of they're putting their money and name behind this, and this is what they do. And I have faith in their ability to stand behind a project and make sure that it's solid, it's safe, it's well constructed, properly engineered. This is like no other bridge project we've ever done in town. It really does require engineering and some more work than our typical projects entail.
Okay. Do you want to look at the last couple of slides, the pictures that continue on? I think there were just a couple of photographs below there, Grace.
Yeah, just doing the time check as well, right?
That's the approximate area.
That's the project location looking up and downstream. Oh, and there's one more thing, Marcella. That's if you could scroll down. So this is just an excerpt from the 2020 Open Space and Recreation Plan, which was, we sent a survey out to almost 3,000 households, 2,900 households, and we had around a 30% return rate. And one of the questions we asked was for people, what people wanted to see, what improvements they wanted, what they wanted in terms of open space and recreation. So the next slide. Okay, it was question 7, and you can see right at the top, among other things related to trails for the most part, was a townwide loop trail. So we just wanted to present that as additional justification for this project.
Thank you. Anything else you want to present?
Not from me.
Great. Why don't we open it first to the committee for questions? I guess I'll ask the first. Mike, how many of those surveys did you submit? Most of second.
I don't know.
I'll move on.
My 3
I'll
dogs submitted 1. I hope that's not a problem.
Can we just go back to slide 15, please? So just on the construction, are we seeing, are those concrete piers coming out to anchor the bridge? Is that?
Yes, Marcella can answer this. Yes, and I probably should have mentioned that. If you can go back to that. Maybe one of the drawings actually would be better.
Slide up.
Scroll up a bit.
Keep going.
One of them should show the footings. I'm not sure which one, but maybe go up a little further. No, maybe go down. Sorry. I guess it might be the next one. Yeah, here it's this one. You can see the footings on the right. This is the right one. And this is, I think this is a worst case scenario that they would have to actually pour concrete footings on each side. It might be possible to use native materials basically to support the bridge, or maybe bring in, there are some cut granite slabs on the Robertson property that we may be able to use. But this is like a worst case. And I think a lot of the cost, not a lot, but a fair amount of the cost is associated with this. These folks built a bridge like this, a shorter bridge, but the same design, basically with a single I-beam in Dummerston, Vermont. And that one, their supports for the bridge on each side appear to be just 12 by 12, 12 inch by 12 inch timber, probably pressure treated timber. Again, this was Adam Gilbert, who designed this, gave us a conservative design for conceptual, and I think we hope that the concrete footings won't be necessary, but we don't know until some more work is done.
Thanks. Questions from committee?
What's the life expectancy of this bridge?
Forever. This is going to be solid. They didn't give us numbers, but we expect that it'll survive high waters and high winds, and it'll be here through my life.
Is it all made of wood?
There's the other one.
There's an I-beam that's going to be brought in, so the support is going to be steel, and the rest is wood.
You said that you had considered sort of the scout project option, but that it might be washed out with significant rains. What did you consider? If a scout bridge is $10,000 and lasts for 10 years, that might be a more cost-effective option for the town than the built for life bridge that's designed here.
Not if we have to replace it every 10 years, and not if someone gets hurt. If we get a washout, that would be, it could be dangerous. But I also don't think, given the span of this, I don't think that, because we really feel like it needs to be an engineered project. Handing it over as a scout project, while these guys do a fabulous job, I can't complain about how well the Eagle Scouts have done and how much they've done for us. But this is a bigger job, regardless of how we approach it, whether it's a smaller bridge or this. I think we could. I think this will pay for itself especially if we don't have to be rebuilding it every 10 years, and that causes a lot of disruption too.
Marcella, would the wood be pressure treated?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
This is a remote area. Yeah, how would the materials be brought into this project? Could you bring it in on a truck, or they have to be hand carried?
Some would probably be hand carried. The I-beam, we had the folks who are going, would be building this. They took a look at the site, and they can bring that in through the Robertsons property, and that seemed to be okay with everybody. When we last discussed this, John was still living, but John, Cynthia, and Catherine seemed to be on board with bringing that I-beam through from the back of their house.
But wouldn't be damaging any of the flora and fauna?
The area in the back of the house is a mowed field. There's some woodland that they felt they could move through the trees and get this in there. There's not much of a woodland barrier between the field and the at Warren Brook, and it's and you can't. It's hard to tell when you're on the trail that there is a field not too far away, because the brook is down low and you're looking up to where the woods are. And that's one of the reasons it's probably easy for them, or it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be manageable for them to bring an I-beam in, because they bring it down slope. They can kind of glide it into place from the upper area. So while it does from the trail, it looks very wooded and looks like there's more woods there than there are. There's actually a field back there, and that would be the access.
Thank you.
So we're just going to show you right there. You can see the field with this that open area. It's its staging area there in the,
okay.
the lower left circle to the bridge.
Yeah.
Any questions from any members of the public? Hopefully, unmute and sing out. I don't hear anybody. All right.
I have a question and statement. Can I ask, because I can't see those drawings, what is the length of the bridge?
What is the span of the bridge? How long is it?
The length of the IB?
I guess how long is the I-beam going to be?
It's
Oh, I've got
approximately
it. 31
30 feet.
Challenge the statement that this lasts
If I
forever.
it may end up being 32 feet or a little longer, depending on the final design. Right now, we did some hydraulic analysis, not done by an engineer, and that need to be checked. But the bridge elevation is set above the 100-year flood elevation, we believe, somewhere within 100 to 200 feet, 200 years. That's partly why it's as long as it is, so that we can, get it above a 100-year event.
Yeah, I would offer one challenge to the bridge will last forever. My knowledge, it's two classes of pressure treated lumber. One has a 30-year lifespan and one has a 40-year lifespan. So in a bridge being built in the exterior environment, I would doubt you would see that lumber would last more than 50 years and have to be replaced or closed because it wouldn't be safe to the public. So if this is not something that's going to be put out there and last 100 years without being maintained or restored. So.
Okay.
Can I actually make a couple comments, Paul?
Sure, yeah, and just let me just clarify, Mike and Marcella, the I-beam and the hardware, the bolts, that's going to be met. Those are the only metal parts. The rest of the bridge is going to be pressure treated lumber of some sort.
Well, actually, we're hoping to use black locust for the decking, and which would last longer than pressure treated. We're not having the best results with just pressure treated wood on some of our boardwalks. There's one boardwalk at Warren Brook. I think it's less than 10 years old, and we're going to have to replace the decking. So ideally, it would be black locust, which is a tree native to New England, which is extremely rot resistant.
Thanks.
Without any chemical treatment.
Kathy.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on a couple things that were touched upon in the presentation. My name's Kathy Robertson, and it's my parents' land that is, that we're talking about here. And my dad and my mom and I have both been part of all these conversations. Just a little bit of a, history of why this location was decided upon. Originally, when the development rights were sold to the town, there was an easement for a trail put through it. This was not the original location, but the velocity and the way the brook is formed is somewhat dependent. There was a beaver dam that channeled water. It was off of Fowler Street, and so that changed when somebody breached the beaver dam, because now the flow goes directly down, and so it changed a lot. So when you went to the original site where it was originally proposed, it's now really, really, really broad and marshy. So that would not have been a good location. So folks came back and we walked it. We found this as a good location because it's a gorge. So it doesn't, so we're surrounded by rock, so it's not going to expand out. This is one sort of narrow area, so you could do a relatively, small, a shorter span without encroaching on wetlands. When I was growing up around here, we used to put boards across or logs across, and they would stay for a couple of years, and we would fall off them all the time too because they weren't very stable. The way the brook is now, it's much wider. It's a very different configuration. You really can't do that anymore. I don't know of any area of that brook right now where you can just throw either logs or, it's very difficult, except in the summertime when you can pretty much, I still do it now. I just take rocks, I jump rocks, and if I fall in, it's not a big deal because it's warm. But again, the size and the shape is that brook is always changing, and a lot of it's dependent on the beaver dam. I'm assuming someday the beavers are going to come back, and that's going to change again. But right now, it is a difficult place to do a crossing for. The fellow that heads up the projects for the Boy Scouts, who's worked, I think, with open space on a number of the bridges they've already done, said that he was on one of the site walks we did that the town did when they were looking at possible sites, and he said that it was beyond the Scouts' capacity. So that's not just Marcella assuming. That was the person who works with the Eagle Scouts to do the project saying, we can't do this one. It's too much for us. And then as far as the staging area goes, I just want to be more definitive about that. My mother and father have both approved the access. Folks that know their land know where the millstone is, and there's a pathway that goes, it looks like a driveway. It's not paved though, that goes right down to the backfield, and that leads right outside where they're planning to bring the I-beam down, and my parents said it was fine. They assured my parents that there'd be no damage to the property. I think they were planning at that time to use some sort of pulley system. So they would transport the beam down there and use a pulley system to take it down slope. And there's a pretty significant pathway there that, we always used when we were kids. People now, go in the backfield all the time, and animals use it. So I don't think that damage to the existing, the wooded buffer is gonna, I think it'll be an easy pull. So, again, so this does have the support. This change in crossing does have the support of, it had the support of my mother and father, and my mother, still is a big supporter. I'm just the mouthpiece.
Thanks, Kathy. Any other questions or comments on this proposal? If anyone's online trying to talk, you're muted. All right, hearing none, I will move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll vote aye. Rick?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
Joan?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And Brittany?
Aye.
All right, public hearing is closed. We've got them lined up, folks, so we're going to go through the other two public hearings, and then we can talk about them all as a committee after we get them opened and closed. So we're gonna open a public hearing on the Upton Historical Commission's request for up to $5,000 for the fabrication and placement of a new sign at Upton's Heritage Park. Who is here from Upton Historical to talk about that?
Ed Phillips, Chair of the Upton Historical Commission.
And folks here, Ed? Folks on the screen? Great, thank you.
All right, I speak loud enough.
You're usually all right.
When I joined the commission last fall, it was a project that was actively being discussed, that the existing sign made from wood many years ago is seriously deteriorating and rotted. This is an entire section about ready to fall off. So it's lived its life and is about done. It has been taken down and put in storage for the winter, and I'm not sure we'll have it put back up, but we'll be discussing that at our next meeting. So we went out looking for quotes from at least 3 vendors to replace the sign. We received a quote for over $10,000 from one company. We received a quote for slightly over $5,000 from the second company. And we got a quote from BBT for $1,300 and change to all of them to replace the existing wooden sign with a high density structural foam hand carved and painted sign. So the commission has already voted to BBT if the funding is put in place. BBT back in February seeking $5,000, which is a significant upside we anticipate on spending over the $100 range and potentially some small amenities that may have to be added. I don't see us exceeding $2,000 to replace the sign. BBT has advised that if they get approval after the town meeting, that they will start the project in September, and it would take approximately 6 weeks to construct a new sign and complete it. So we'll call 2 months for the students to replace the sign. They will install the sign in place when they are done, with the other 2 companies and both were not. So the sign will look as closely as possible exactly comparative to the state today, which I assume someone worked hard to design many years back.
Great. Chris, you might want to just mute there for a sec.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Thanks, Ed. Anything else? All right. Questions from the committee. I'll start again, I guess. So but the sign is going to look like it's a wood sign, or is it going to look like a plastic sign, or you're not going to be able to tell because it's going to be a painted sign?
You're not going to be able to tell once it's painted. It'll look just like the sign is there today. Yes, its life will be, I would say in this case, at least 100 years, because the structural foam will not deteriorate in ultraviolet light or anything else. It's a very, very durable. It may be painting from time to time, but not the construction of it itself.
Okay.
And it's far enough off the road, yeah, you're not gonna be able to tell them.
Yes.
And you've got a request for 5,000. That's what your warrant article is for. Are you asking us to approve up to 5,000 tonight, or some lower number?
I could say that number could be reduced to 2,500 and be very comfortable with that to replace the sign.
You sure you're comfortable there? And that
We got a quote for 1,300 and change. We've asked them to carve the lettering by hand, which originally they were going to use acrylic letters, which would, in some of the members' opinion, look like acrylic letters from a distance. The feedback from BBT was that the students would not be skilled in carving lettering. Feedback from a couple of members of our commission was, we don't care, and we're not looking for a perfect carving. We're looking for something that looked like it was carved out of wood. The current one isn't perfect lettering, and you put paint on it, and you'll be able to see that it says Upton, whatever, Heritage Park. So that might add a few hundred, but no more. So if you wanted to reduce the request to 2,500, we would be very comfortable with doing that.
Okay. Suggestion maybe we give you 3,000, further reduce it at town floor, just because whatever we send up, that's going to be your limit, and you might just give that. That's my thought.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, the bottom line is when we spend it, spent it, everything else would be given back to the coffers. It would not be something we come back in 2011 and 2020.
And I think that, that's a good point. And it's also, I think it always goes over well if you're reducing it at the 10th floor. People appreciate that you sharpen your pencil.
10 years from now, when you ask us to buy the paint, right? Then it's there.
So I'm concerned with throwing a little more in, but you can't do that ethically. The comment from PCT was, we're going to use some of the paint we have. And I said, you should be asking for the monies to buy the paint for this project.
Right.
Even if you use paint you have on the shelves in your school and you have to replace those for some other projects. So
You're getting a good deal.
we may ask them to revise their quote, or for them to do it if they wish. And it still wouldn't exceed the amount we're talking about.
Right. Other questions from the board?
The 3,000 sounds right to me.
Anyone else have any questions? Anybody from the public have a question on this project? Hearing none, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Rick?
Aye.
Joan?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Brittany?
Aye.
And I'll make it unanimous. We are closed. We're well past the hour, right? Yep. We're gonna open a public hearing on a request by the Upton Grange for up to $120,000 for restoration and preservation of the Upton Grange Hall, 26 School Street. Eddie presenting again, or?
I believe Kristen Paulson and Tracy are on, but I would certainly like to lead the overview of the project and then have them support it with any feedback they may have. If that's okay, Kristen.
She says yes.
That's
Right, the Upton Grange was sold the former Upton Center School in 1926 by the town of Upton. Selectmen sold them the building, and they've possessed the building for the last 97 years. Very little considerable exterior maintenance has been done in that period, and the building is slowly showing its age. It was built in 1851. The Grange came before the Historical Commission back in January asking if we could offer any assistance whatsoever in helping them find a way to do some restoration work on the structure. Our commission wholeheartedly supported the request and came with them to this awesome body here and requested funding back in February, I believe it was, of $120,000 to do exterior restoration only. The Historical Commission suggested we would not support any interior restoration work because the most significant deterioration of the building had already been addressed by the Grange itself in restoring some rotted sills using state Grange mortgage money that they got 10 years ago or 8 years ago. So we sent it to this body, received support and a request for $120,000 with the commitment that we would assist, the Historical Commission would assist the Grange in applying for a Massachusetts State Historical Commission 50% matching grant, which there was a grant funding available with a application deadline of March 17th. On March 16th, the application was mailed to the State Historical Commission. And during the February meeting with the CPC and the mailing of the application, the project evolved in several ways. The state grant application required an architect be secured to support the project and be in place prior to the submission of the application. It also required that an attorney be available to do title search and preservation restriction search and any of that stuff, which was done. In hiring an architect, and the architect is Scott Richardson, who lives on Grove Street in town. We were able to find an architect who was a town resident to support the project. He came forward with cost estimates to replace the cost estimates that Ken Paulson and myself had come up with in roof replacement, siding repair and painting, handicap ramp, repaired. When we asked for the 120, he came up with an estimate between 200 and 250,000 to do the restoration of the building. In reading the state grant application, which said that you must have in place at the point of submitting the application or a commitment that it would be at the town meeting floor soon afterwards, 75% of the total funding of the project to manage cash flow, similar to the discussion that was held earlier on the bridge. You've got to be able to manage the cash flow prior to the state reimbursing you of any of the funds. So in the trying to understand that process, the project went from $120,000 to $160,000 project for the state's benefit, seeking a 50% grant, which would be $80,000. With that, if it all gets approved, in other words, if the state approves the grant award, which is in late June, if the town of Upton approves the CPC funding of $120,000, after the $160,000 project, including the state grant, is completed, would leave $40,000 of CPC funding, which would then be used to bring the total project scope up to a $200,000 project. Without being able to talk to contractors, and the state grant application specifically prohibits talking to any contractors prior to grant award. All we can rely on is the estimates that Ken Paulson, myself, and the architect came up with for what is needed to restore the exterior of that building. Without sending it out to bid and getting actual numbers, it's difficult to know what the actual cost of each phase will be. So with all of that said, it has evolved to a $200,000 restoration project, which is believed to be potentially insufficient to do all of the work. Question will become, can all of the significant restoration work be done, leaving range with the process of doing fundraisers in the next 5 to 10 years and finishing the work on their own after that work is done. And part of the work that the architect added into it was renovating the 2 bathrooms interior to the building, one which had previously been renovated by the Grange but needs some handicap modifications, and the other one which is completely closed because it needs total restoration. So leaving those to the responsibility of the Grange afterwards, or to a possible future request for funding from this body. We're a $200,000 project seeking $80,000 from the state. With the grant application award decisions being made June 24th, and the town meeting vote on May 4th, with all restoration work required to be completed no later than June 30th of 2024. It basically can't be started until after bidding is done, contractors are selected, preservation restrictions are put on the deed with the Worcester Registry of Deeds. I think that's all I can think of to cover the project.
Any comment, further clarification from the applicants? Right, Ed, you've given us the entire presentation. So I had some questions. I was having trouble doing the math as you went through it. You applied for $120,000, and I think that, looking at the application, you were hoping that was going to be about the size of the project. That it was going to come in at somewhere between 97.5 and 122.5. Then you talked about it being a $200,000 project, which might not be enough, but you said in the middle there that for state purposes, it's going to be a $160,000 project, so that the $200,000 project would be funded with 120 from CPC and 80 from the state, representing 50% grant against 160. So how, if it's a $200,000 project, do you come up with 160 for the state.
So if you don't mind, if I,
Let me jump in, because this is the same headache we had for about a month.
Okay.
Until rereading the state application requirements saying you have to have 75% of the funding available when you start the project before the state's gonna give you a penny. You're gonna be able to manage cash flow. So we said, all right, we've asked the CPC for 120,000. 120,000 is 75% of $160,000.
Yeah.
So if we call the project for the benefit of the state grant, $160,000 project, asking them for 50% match, which is 80,000, and having 120 on hand to manage cash flow, be 160. When we're all done with what we've told the state needs to be done, it would leave $40,000 in the CPC coffers that's been approved for the project that we would then spend to finish probably replacing all the windows in the building, which are original to the building, 1851.
Okay.
I
So,
don't know if that helps. It
Yeah.
was rather complicated to us to figure out how to answer the state's question.
so you're, for the state grant, you're gonna apply, you're gonna propose $160,000 project. There's gonna be another $40,000 project sort of off to the side. You're hoping that you'll get 120 from CPC, 80% matching funds come in, and then you believe that $40,000 of that total, because get reimbursed, so you will have 40,000 left over, that will fund phase 2 of the project.
Sort of, yes. From a legal standpoint, the state's been told it's a $200,000 project.
Okay.
But they've been told in the fashion that I described that it's 160 with you giving us 80. Leaving 40, so when you've reimbursed it to manage cash flow, there's 40,000 remaining in the CPC coffers, which you can use for the project. Keep in mind that when we started this, we had given you an estimate of 120,000 is what we thought it would take to replace the roof, paint the building. I don't know all the details from the beginning. And then we found an architect who said, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You can't do what you need to do for 120. And if you do this, you have to replace the handicap ramp. You have to reset and realign the front steps because they don't meet rise and run for ADA issues. You got to replace the railings at the front of the building. And which we hadn't originally discussed. We said, if we're going to do this extensive restoration of this building, we don't want to have to come back. We should replace the windows, which are in pretty good shape for 175-year-old windows, but they're 175-year-old windows. And that would be the, hopefully, approximately 40,000. It's been estimated at 40,000 by a window company and by the architect. However, that 40K at the end could be to pay cost overruns. Because these are imperfect numbers, they're estimates with no contractor putting a seal of approval or anything. And with the bidding not going to happen until September, October of this year, with who knows what's going to happen to costs before this year is over.
Okay. So what you'd be asking for us and what you'd be asking the town to vote on would be that $120,000, and the town's approval of those funds would be actually contingent upon you getting the grant in June. So if you didn't get the grant in June, the funds would disappear. Is that?
then we're still left with just the 120.
If we
You
get
don't get the extra 80 if the grant gets disapproved.
What could you do with the 120? That because
we
you're,
could replace the roof, we could paint the building, repair the siding, and possibly replace the handicap ramp, maybe not. So we could do the basic original scope of fixing the siding, replacing rot, painting the building, and putting a new roof on it. If the state grant is not awarded, they would still want to do restoration of the building, and it would be put out to bid. I envision, and this would be a discussion with the architect, that every one of these categories would be bid. Even if it's a $300,000 project, every category would be bid. So we would have hard numbers to say, here's what each one of these cost. And in the state grant application, the categories of restoration were prioritized, such that roof must be replaced, number one. siding repaired, rock repaired, and painted, number 2. So we get the exterior sealed up for another 50 years. And then number 3, handicap ramp. However, it was raised by the selectmen and by someone at the selectmen's meeting that the more that gets spent, the higher degree of probability is that ADA issues have to be addressed. Not maybe, they have to be addressed. So at some point, I've been told 30% of the total valuation of the building is valued at 410, 420, 430, something like that. At $140,000, $50,000, you have to address the handicapped issues. So until the grant application decision is made, yes or no, and we were informed this morning that the supposed $1 million of grant money that might be available, I don't think it's been voted by the state legislature yet, but is anticipated. The grant requests that have been received total $2.4 million. So there is the possibility that if the Mass Historical Commission reviews all of these and they all wind up perfect applications, which won't happen, if they all wind up perfect applications, they could say, okay, everybody gets 40% of what they asked for. So we get 35,000, not 80,000.
Okay.
But to your point, no matter what we get from the state, restoration work is still needed on the building. And the more we get from the state, the less chance of coming back to this body a year from now and saying, we've got more to do. We want to ask for your assistance in doing it.
Okay. And I'll just throw a comment. I saved a couple more questions, but you might have a very hard time at town floor. You might have a hard time in this meeting with this committee with kind of a project that could be $120,000 project, or it could be a $200,000+ project. Getting that 120 approved, not contingent upon the state funding, I think is a little bit harder. I did have one other question. We had asked who project management would be, and you've given the project team, which was very helpful, and more than we usually get. We've got an architect, a project manager, and a building committee listed in your application, and a treasurer. I think maybe every one of our projects that we've funded, we've asked the town board or committee be sort of the project manager. And I didn't know if that was going to be Upton Historical that would be the overarching.
Well, I'm in a difficult spot because I was requested to reach out to the state ethics commission for the role that I played to this point in greatly assisting with the application preparation and submission. But I feel I did that on behalf of the town of Upton and the historical commission and the CPC, helping to prepare a very complex grant application, trying to get money from the state rather than coming back to the CPC at some point saying they need another 80,000 or 100,000 to restore this building, which is Upton's oldest standing schoolhouses. It's one of our more valuable buildings. I have been advised to play a minimal role from this point forward, especially interfacing with any town commissions or committees, other than the work that I've done with the CPC and the Grange to this point, so that I cannot play a role as a project coordinator. Now, the state grant application had very specific requirements and questions throughout, which was you have to identify an architect, you have to identify a lead project coordinator, which Ken Paulson of the Grange. You have to designate a treasurer, which we originally designated the treasurer of the Grange, and then decided that all of the invoices would need to be approved by this body and submitted to the town accountant. Therefore, Ken Costa should be the treasurer of account in the grant application and on the project.
Right. The rest of the committee and the town might feel differently. It's just we've generally had a board that's elected because everybody in here can move and not be a townsperson anymore. And I think when it's town money, we're looking for folks. And what's happened on the funding side, and you bring up an important point, we'll generally have, for example, if it was the open space committee, they would come to us and say, here's the next invoice. They've done sort of the work they present it to us. We as a committee will look at it, see if we have any issues, and then it goes to Ken Costa. So we've really got 3 checkpoints to make sure that the money's being spent correctly. So you might not be able to do it, but I would think that the historical commission, as a town board, as opposed to just the Grange as a private organization, would be something I'd be looking for that oversight. So,
Well, I know the architect has to approve all invoices to satisfy the Mass Historical Commission.
Yep.
And there's no reason why the invoices could not be brought to the Historical Commission for review, submitted to the architect for approval, and then submitted to the CPC for approval, questions, and submission to the town accountant. I don't see any issues with that at all.
okay.
I agree. I agree. We would certainly defer to your wishes. Whatever you needed, we would accommodate you.
Other committee members might have questions.
I guess the only question that I would have is, so we're here with the 120 now, right? So that's, I understand, fully get it's the 75% of the state grant piece. The state, let's just say, is able to approve it at the full amount, which would get us 50% of the 160, hence the other 80. Do we have to spend that 120? And what's the sign off piece to back to the state saying we've then spent the 75 to then get reimbursed the other 80 to take it from the 120 to 200, right? Because that's how I see it. It isn't really the 400. We have to spend that whole 120 probably in order to get the reimbursement piece. That might not be fair for you. Maybe that's okay.
Well, having filled out the grant application, I think the answer is, as I understand it, is the $160,000 project. It's part of the reason for defining what that is to the state, to ask for the 50% matching.
Sure.
That when $80,000 or greater has been spent and paid, the state will refund $40,000.
Okay.
When the final $80,000 has been paid, report submitted, everything they require, the final $40,000 will be paid.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it's 2 payments of 50% or so
Okay.
each. One some way through the project when we spent twice that, and the other is when the project is finished. And what complicated it was to say it was 160 with 40,000 remaining.
Yep.
Was that issue alone.
Yeah, I got you.
To say that not that the state isn't going to watch the final 40 and make sure they approve the windows or whatever that 40 is used for at the end, they will. They won't walk away from it, but I think it takes us outside of the June 30th next year deadline. And it takes out of the issue of how the state's going to pay and fund the money.
Got it.
To get the reimbursement, the project has to be completed by June of 2024.
To get 50% reimbursement, you have to spend 80,000 or greater. To get the final reimbursement, everything has to be done prior to June 31st next year, or they will not reimburse a penny for anything spent. Yeah. It has a hard deadline period, and if you were to do something July 10th of next year, they wouldn't reimburse the money that was spent. And to make it complicated, which almost made the Grange walk away from the grant application, was the cost of the architect, the cost of the attorney, and a few of the things that were demanded by the state, which says, why would you ask for $60,000 or $80,000 grant if you got to spend $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000 to get it? And the response was that an architect shouldn't cost that much. Although the Grange got 2 quotes from 2 good architects, one was $38,000 and one was $75,000. Asking for a $60,000 to $80,000 grant, it was like, you gotta be kidding me. That's when I offered my services, which reduced Scott Richardson's company's proposal from $75,000 to $11,000. And I said, all I'm trying to do is save the town of Upton some money and get this building restored. So. Anyways,
Yeah, that's other questions? The committee?
One comment through the chair. This is Chris. I do believe that there are some grants that could pay for some of the handicapped accessible things that you've been talking about. So I wouldn't want to say put another grant on this, but there are grants for handicapped accessible features.
Chris? Any other committee members? Anybody from the public want to pose a question or make a comment? Dan? Dan was up.
Yeah, so CBC's in listening to these hearings. We're not actually in session. We're gonna have a meeting after this. We were asked by the manager and FinCom to come listen to the hearings. It's private property, both projects that were on the hearings tonight, so we're not gonna have any kind of recommendations to the legislative body. But we're here to give some feedback and help in this regard to as a project. I have two quick questions. First, is this a preservation project or a restoration project of the building? Or is it a grant to the state to allow us to just do whatever we can afford to do to the building?
this is specifically a restoration of the building as defined by the state grant application. And the state grant body, the Mass Historical Commission that oversees this, was very, very specific about defining the scope of the project, prioritizing each phase of the project, and that's why we struggle through what do we really think the total is going to cost, but this is the priority. We can get the roof capped, siding and rock replaced, and the building painted, and a new handicap ramp. We've done 95% of the most significant stuff that weathering would affect destroying that building and preserve it for, I have said, a twice in a century project. I mean, this building should survive another 50 years without any significant work, if this work gets done to the exterior. That buttons it up, keeps the rainwater out.
So it's more of this is more of a restoration stabilization project, basically. And that's how the grants submitted to the state for state, just because the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Officers, could be one of the ruling people on this grant.
If the grant is awarded. The grant is awarded,
I bring up that point is just to set expectations for the public of understanding what's going on. People see 120 and then they're gonna see the building doesn't look like it changed that much. This is not unusual for historic preservation project and understanding it. I guess my bigger question to the commission, historic commission or CPC, it's first and foremost, it's great to see a preservation project again come for these dollars. This and affordable housing has been sorely missing in a lot of the requests. It's great to see that, but I think it's going to be helpful for two things to happen for this. First would be giving the public what the long-term view is, what the Grange would look like if it continues down with multiple projects like this to get restored to its glory, per se. Let's just put it that way. So you can set public expectations reasonably. And then the second question I have with regard to that is I don't think you would have any issues with ADA on this project. Because if it's just going to be an exterior project, other than correcting the ramp problem, you would really only have to deal with that because you're touching it. You're not planning to do any alterations within the building, correct?
That's correct.
So you're outside, you're not doing any alterations.
And the ramp
You would be able to subtract all the dollars out to get away from the MAB triggers. You should be able to remove all those out. But I think the bigger question is there's a bunch of uncertainty with regard to schedule and budget. And it's great to hear that Richardson, being a town resident, is kind of sounds like you'd be doing most pro bono work. I know my firm does a lot of preservation work, and those are not big numbers for doing this kind of work. So again, just from an expectation standpoint.
Dan, you prompted a question in my mind as well. you know, to talk about the end purpose. And it'll be a question that comes up, what's in it for the town? And so, and you've talked about it being the oldest schoolhouse. How is the town protected? Can you talk a little bit about the preservation restriction that'll be on the building? And do you have a sense as to what that restriction will look like?
Well, both the state grant application, the Mass Historic Commission, and the town of Upton's legal body, KP Law, have both provided documentation, one which we filled out and submitted with the application, one which I received last week from KP Law that would need to be filled out. Both of them require the submission of a preservation restriction on the building, which is attached to the deed in perpetuity. So no matter what the Grange does with this building, after the restoration work is done, even if it's 50 or 100 years from now, that deed to that property will carry a preservation restriction, which basically requires, as I understand it, the Mass Historical Commission to address any restoration work that is done to that building in the future, both exterior and interior, even though we're only doing exterior work on this.
Thank you. Dan,
Follow-up question to that prompted me to bring another back.
you and I are gonna keep going all night. Hopefully not.
Historic district, the community's got a historic district. It's a treasure. It's really not been attended to lately. The church and the Grange are probably two of the most significant properties in there. And I know Mr. Pink was on the other line there electronically. I actually am reaching through my preservation architect to try to find out about our own historic district documentation from the MPS. This has got to get up on the website for the town, and it's got to be shown there because it's really important. Otherwise,
You can go to macros.com if you're unfamiliar. And you can look
that's
up,
where I got a preservation architect can help you with.
you can look at all the buildings that were submitted back 2015, I think, and it was all, the work was done in 1996, which listed the Upton Center Historic District, the Upton North Historic District where the Grange is located, and the West Upton Historic District, and all of the properties in those three districts that were documented are all listed on Macros on the state website.
And one of the first conditions that we need to look at for a project like this is whether the building is eligible. And being on the Macros is one way to become eligible, and it was. I did look that up today to make sure. And there are a lot of Upton sites on that listing. And I think Russ, you had said that the Upton Historical had found that was maybe that was a different building. But it is on the state website, so, yeah.
One of the requirements of the grant application was that the properties be listed on the Register of Historic Places, which we checked first, and it was.
Yeah.
One of the questions that they asked us, the Historic Commission, is what buildings exist in town that are not owned either by private individuals, homes, etc., or by the town of Upton that would fall under historic properties. And while I may not know all of the properties in the town of Upton, I can only come up with the Grange, perhaps whoever owns the old Methodist Church in West Upton. And that's all I can think of.
Holy Angels.
Holy Angels is owned by the town of Upton.
Yeah.
Which
Oh,
I
you say-
which I excluded. That's owned by the town of Upton. Grange is a nonprofit, and whoever owns the Methodist Church, I don't know what entity they are, but I can't think of any other entity that could come and say we're a nonprofit or we're a private, and we want Upton money to help restore our building.
Yeah, I think that to bring up that point, Paul, I think there's two buildings that stick out that are right here in the center of town's Grange and Holy Angels Church are clearly contributing properties to the district. And if you start to lose control of those, you might as well not have a district. So does the community want to lose a district? And I don't think most people would want that because it contribute. And it doesn't mean that every other building or property in the district has to be to these levels, but at least it has to be within a spirit of contributing to what the community looked like and what Main Street looked like. And
One of the questions that was asked along the way was, have any other Granges in the state of Massachusetts received CPC funding for restoration work? Told by the Mass Historical Commission that at least 3 have. they wouldn't name them, but that several hundred nonprofit entities in Massachusetts have received CPC monies from their towns to support restoration work because they're perceived as valuable historic buildings. Kristen did find out a couple of days ago that Acushnet Grange is one of the Granges that received CPC money to do restoration work sometime in the past. So this isn't like we're trying to break new ground.
Yeah, I'll contribute to that. I mean, 2 or 3 of our preservation architects serve on their historic commissions in their communities, mostly Eastern Mass, and around the city and such. This is a very common thing to be done in a district or historic district, let it stay nationally recognized. So, I mean, like I said, this is what the CPA tax has been intended to support and do. So, from a public use of money, it's completely appropriate.
Other questions, comments? Anybody online have a question or a comment? Unmute and have at it.
Mr. Chairman, Dick Henderson, 20 Brook Street.
Hey, Dick.
How you doing? Just a question. I'm fully support this, but I do have a concern for the Grange, and I haven't been in there in a number of years. But is there any type of fire protection in this building at this time? Smoke detectors, pull stations, anything like that?
I can answer you with after the about 15 years ago, the big fire in Rhode Island at the club, the Upton police, fire chief came to all the public buildings, and our Grange was one of them. They went through it, and we spent over $5,000. They required us to change all the doors with bars to go outward. So escape, we had to have lighted exit signs, fire hydrants. They went through and gave us a list, fire extinguishers. They gave us a list of what they wanted, where they wanted it, and we spent the money to meet the requirements of the town of Upton for fire safety.
Excellent. Great answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Rick?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Russ?
I,
Chris?
Aye.
Brittany?
Aye.
And Mike?
Aye.
I'll make it unanimous. So we are closed. Thank you, everybody. We're going to stay in our public meeting and discuss the requests that we've got tonight. So why don't we take the dollar? Starting with, we've got a request for, the initial request was up to $5,000. It's been lowered to up to $3,000 to replace the sign at Heritage Park. I would move that we approve the request for $3,000 for that project, with the funding to come from the Historic Reserve Fund to the extent available, and if not, from the general fund. So I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion. Anyone have any questions, comments, concerns about that project?
that was a good project.
Okay, I'm glad we started with that one first. It's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. So we'll go. Rick.
I approve.
Joan.
Yes.
Russ.
I,
Chris.
Aye.
Brittany.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
And I will make it unanimous. So it's $3,000 to come from the Upton Historic Reserve Fund to the extent available, and if not, from the CPC General Fund. All right, the next one, the bridge project. Oh, sorry, Joe.
Hi, sorry, I didn't want to yell out. Just so that everyone knows, we'll have to handle, sorry, for the record, Joe Layden, Town Manager. The board last night voted to execute the warrant, so this will have to handle as a part of the motion before town meeting. So just want to at least let everyone know.
Thank you.
I think I drew short straw as chair this time, so Joe, I'll work with you or the moderator or whoever needs to on the motions. I'll be at town meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, I guess that's for all three of these. And as soon as Tom Davidson hears I'm going to the meeting, he'll make me do it for planning board too. So. Let's, don't tell him, please. Don't tell him. Let's go with the bridge project. There is a request from the Open Space Committee to fund up to $120,000 to construct a bridge on the Robertson Conservation Restriction land. I believe that, and Mike, please, and Chris, please correct me if I'm wrong, that an application will be made to obtain a trails grant of up to $80,000. But so I would make a motion to approve the project, to approve the request for up to $120,000, subject to application for, but not award of, a trails grant of up to $80,000. So you have to apply for it, Mike. And with the funds to come from the open space reserve fund to the extent available, and then to the general CPC funds. I'll make that motion.
I second that motion.
All right, it's moved and seconded. Discussion.
So the discussion, I guess the only question I have is, from an application standpoint, is that grant open for submission right now? Like, can it, you know what I mean?
Yes,
Is it,
Good question.
I'd like to actually, maybe request a friendly amendment to the motion. We have actually applied for the grant. The application.
okay.
The application was due a couple months ago. I don't remember exactly when, but it's in. And then the awards are typically announced sometime in like the middle to late June. But the application itself has been submitted by.
Okay. Why don't we take that out of the motion? And but Mike, you'll just present that. You'll make that statement at the town meeting.
We can do that. Sure.
Okay. So the motion is, by friendly amendment, is to approve the request for $120,000 from the open space funds to the extent available. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Marcella has her hand up.
Marcella.
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have taken it down. Mike clarified the grant, that I just wanted to mention that the grant had already been applied for.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Well, do we know how much money we have in these accounts? Because we keep saying up to, if we have it.
So good question. Well, so under the CPC, we have to put 10% of our anticipated CPC revenue into 3 designated accounts each year. You can put more, but what we've done since the inception is to put the minimum in. And the reason being is it gives us maximum flexibility. So we've got each year, roughly $90,000 comes in, and roughly 9, whatever goes to each of those accounts. So I don't know the running tally.
And the rest of the money just goes to our general.
Which can be used for any of those 3.
Okay.
Historical, open space, and community housing. And it can also go towards recreation. That does not have a designated account for it.
Okay.
All right, so I don't know the number right now. I did get the number actually before housing, because there's been questions about that recently. That's got the most money in it because we haven't spent it. That's correct. So that's why I always make the motion, because we want to use those funds first for designated purposes.
Okay, thank you.
But that's my
But
motion.
yeah.
That's my reasoning. We can always do it differently if anybody prefer.
No, I just didn't understand if we didn't have enough in that particular fund. And
Yeah.
Right.
do we get just, okay, let's grab some more money out of the general?
We can, that's exactly right. And those general funds, most of them are spoken for, historical, actually to get this town, the town hall, restored. That was there, they were one of the driving forces for it. They agreed to dedicate that 10% fund, not all funds, but that 10% to the bond payment for the Upton Town Hall.
Oh, okay.
So that's the longest term obligation we have for any of the funds.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Steve Byrne has his hand up.
All right, well, Steve, we're in the middle of a motion, but let's see, we'll go with you for, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, Paul, I just wanted to mention, I have the balances if you're interested in what they are, because we've been, the finance committee has been trying to get our arms around stabilization, free cash, and community preservation. So if you want me to give you the totals, I can. We got them from Kenny Costa last week.
That would be excellent. Thank you, Steve.
All right, so for the undesignated fund, you have $885,376.69. For historic, you have $213,435.40. Open space, $404,318.46. Then community housing is $788,816.75 for a total community preservation balance of $2,291,947.30.
Mr. Byrne, thank you very much.
That's great.
You can continue with your motion now, Mr. Carey.
Thank you, sir. Any other helpful comments, questions? All right, moved and seconded. All in favor, Rick?
I approve.
Joan?
Aye.
Russ? Chris?
Aye.
Brittany?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I will make it unanimous. All right. The last one is the request by the Upton Grange for $120,000 for restoration of the Upton Grange property. I will, this one had the most twists and turns, but I'll make a motion to approve the request for $120,000 with here's my issue. Before we make a motion, I'm having a hard time with this request for the 120 without the 50% grant funds coming in, because I just don't know how the project hangs together if it's just the 120 and the state grant doesn't come through. Because it's unlike the bridge project, if they don't get their money, we've awarded enough to do the entire project. Whereas with this project, if you don't get the grant, you don't have enough money from CPC to do the whole project. So I'm inclined to make a motion subject to that grant coming in.
Offer one comment, please.
Yep.
Project as defined in the cost estimates and the prioritization has been broken into components. So I would argue that is it better to do one component like completely replacing the roof than to do nothing at all? So it's completely replace the roof, repair the siding and paint the building, replace a handicap ramp, and 3 or 4 other categories, that it's a matter of biting off piece by piece by piece until the money's gone, saying we've tightened up the roof so the building's not going to leak. And the roof should be good for 50 years. They're lifetime shingles they put on these days, maybe 60 or 70 years. I don't know. I wouldn't stretch it that far. So the argument is, can we take it piece by piece by piece and at least do some significant restoration work? 120 goes a long way. Does everything have to be done? No, everything does not have to be done this year, next year, or the year after. But if the roof gets replaced and the siding repaired and the building painted, that can all be done for well under $120,000. The building's been tightened up for. But the concern the historical commission initially had was, how do we keep that building standing for another 100 years and in town and, one of our oldest schoolhouses?
Yeah. Okay. You've heard kind of point and counterpoint. Does somebody want to make a motion?
What fund is this coming from?
I would say it would come from the historic to the extent available.
Okay.
Yeah, you said this is 213K somewhat, right? So-
Yes.
So I will move to fund the up to $120,000. Historical for the Grange improvements. With the application's gone in for the grant. Yes.
For external restoration. Yeah.
For external restoration only. Nothing on the inside. Yeah.
Got a motion?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
120,000, just be for what if we don't get the grant? We still spend 120,000.
So the motion is for the 120, not contingent upon grant funds.
They'll prioritize the list of things to do to keep it upright.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I think it's important. I got to add one thought is thinking back over the last 2 months. It's been a long journey. The original request was $120,000 defined by a set list of estimates. Roof, siding, painting. I don't remember the exact list. You probably have that in front of you. So it was a $60,000 request from the CPC. At which point we went for the grant and we had to get an architect involved. We came in and said, we've got to do this, and this. And that's how the project grew in scope. The architect's estimates, as I recall, in total for roof, siding, painting, de-letting, handicap ramp, almost matched to the dollar the original $120,000 request. So that if the state grant does not come through, $120,000 would still be sufficient to tighten up the outside of the building, as I said.
And if the state money comes through, that additional funding would be used for windows. Is that correct?
Windows is actually the last thing on the list. If there's no money for it, they don't get done. But the handicap ramp, resetting front steps, rails, repairing rear fire escape, all the things that the architect added to the necessary requirements of the project. So to the point that Paul was making, the concern that Paul had was 120,000 still does significant tightening up of the exterior of that building and preserves it for at least 50 years.
Yeah.
Further discussion?
This is Mike. I just want to add, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you don't get the grant, you could apply for the grant in a future year for the basically the internal improvements or what wasn't covered with the 120 that the town put into it. Is that true?
I believe so. I believe if another grant cycle becomes available next, you can apply for another grant to do. The only thing you cannot do is if another grant is issued in the future, it will not pay for work that has been done. It has to be within the defined scope of the project that cannot be discussed with contractors and cannot be started until the grant is awarded. So if we did $120,000, if the Grange did $120,000 in restoration and said next year, we need to do more, let's go back for another grant application, coupled with, you would still need a pre-approval of 75% of the total funding of the scope of the project, which would have to come from a CPC in order to do it.
And have a different set of deliverables.
And have a different set of deliverables.
Yeah.
And I would just suggest that, well, I hope you get the grant this time, but if you didn't, you might have a stronger grant application next time, having had, the CPC fund, all the, most of the external improvements. So that's my 2 cents on that.
One of the things that we're hoping on is that the one of the 6 categories the Mass Historical Commission goes through to determine whether they're going to award a grant is if they're awarding a grant in an area or a town that's never asked for one before, as opposed to Boston, Dorchester, some of those towns that have done many of them, that they would favor towns like us that have never gone to them and asked for a penny. Say, it will put you higher up on the list in that one of 6 categories. So for what that's worth. But all of this is if we get a grant award, it's less money than the Grange would ever have to come and ask the CPC for to restore that building.
Sure.
So it's not like they're going to go do extra stuff. It's less they would need from fundraisers for the town to say, can we restore and maintain this building for the future?
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Rick?
Aye.
Joan?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
Chris?
Hi.
Brittany?
Aye.
Mike?
Mike, aye.
And I will vote no. So it passes by a majority. And I'm not going to speak harshly against it. I just think when you get to town floor, you're going to have the numbers a little bit more, a little bit tighter than is in the application we have tonight. So I think your presentation at town floor, if you kind of have those components broken out and make it clear exactly what's going to happen if it's just 120 and not another dime, I think you'll be in better shape. So, but it goes on the town floor. So pass by a majority. Any other business tonight?
Thank you.
We're adding it before 9. All right. Next meeting is the first Wednesday in May. So enjoy the rest of the month, everybody.